How is everyone doing? Strength Chat episode 83, and today I have got a very special guest for you. Today I'm joined by a coach with over 25 years experience, former Great Britain powerlifting head coach. He's got 7 world, 7 European, 30 British, 21 English champions, and basically an all-round good guy. Today I am joined by Lawrence Farncombe. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Steve. Thanks for having me on. As always, an absolute pleasure, mate.
No worries at all. It was actually really good to. I think I saw you at the. You had quite a lot of lifters at the British last year, but it was actually quite good to catch up with you at the English this year to actually speak to you in person, which was really good. What else has been going on? What else have you been up to?
Oh, mate, I've been absolutely flat out. I've opened this massive gym that's just a huge monster. It's phenomenal. I'm very proud of it, but at the same time, oh my God, it's an absolute beast. It's sucked up so much of my time, but yeah, it's well worth it. So I've opened PB Performance. That's part of the reason why. Well, it is the main reason why I'm not the GB head coach on the head, because I knew that I just wouldn't be able to fully commit my time to it. With this place opening. So I've done that. It is open. If you're in Cardiff, by all means, come down and have a look. There's a plug. Outside of that, I've been working on a book that was kind of headhunted by a publishing company to do, which is pretty cool. And yeah, just the same, spending time with cool guys like yourself at championships and helping obviously my lifters out and getting them to do lots of championships, and everything's going really well. I do need to probably, like we've chatted before, I need to also take a bit of a chill pill. We've got to live life too, Steve, a little bit,
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the last time that we spoke, and I think last time you were chatting, you were sort of, you mentioned that you were wearing sort of different hats all the time, speaking to builders, speaking to, all that sort of stuff. Has that sort of settled down a little bit now? Can you sort of focus on, the coaching side of things and, get a little bit of time to yourself?
Yeah, that's totally it, Steve. That's kind of where I'm at now. That's back. You've pretty much hit the nail on the head. That now I'm in a position where I'll just kind of get back into the groove of the coaching a little bit more. Don't get me wrong. I haven't taken really my foot off the gas. I've just actively been dissuading people from wanting to be coached. I've been like, no, I've got way too. But yeah, no. So I'm not wearing those multiple hats now so much. So I can kind of put the coaching side, which is really my true love. It always has been. That the coaching side is stuff I really love. And then every now and again, I get stupid enough to think I can do something else. And then it kicks me in the balls. And I think, yeah, all right, I'm glad I did it. But it is the coaching that I love doing the most. So focus back more time, more effort on that side of it. Yeah.
Oh, nice. And obviously you mentioned there about your, because you've written a book before, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. A few years ago now, actually. I was actually really pleased with that because I didn't have the help of or the kick up the ass from a publishing company or anything like that. And I wrote that book some time ago, and I'm still actually really quite pleased with that book because it was one of the peaking methods I used to use and still do occasionally, in fairness. And I just found it. The reason I wrote the book on it was because it was the most straightforward. That you'll probably agree that as a coach, peaking needs to actually, if you're a coach, that's probably when you're really helping the athletes the most, in the sense that trying to keep them objective, trying not to get them to step over. So it really is something that if you are lucky enough to have a good coach or a coach, full stop really, and they're doing a good job with you, they're going to start guiding you, aren't they? And really, really kind of giving you that extra set of eyes that person needs, because everybody gets doubts, you know what I mean? And they kind of need that confirmation from a coach and told, no, you know what, you're overstepping here, step back. Or occasionally you'll come across the opposite where people need to kind of step up a gear. But the reason I wrote that book is because it was kind of the one peaking strategy that was the less coach in depth. Right. So it means that you could almost like cookie cutter it. You know what I mean? You have set points to hit. You hit those points. Don't be stupid about it. You can do this, you can do that. Yeah. Whereas in truth, all the other peaks I used to run and still do, they're very much about me guiding the athlete in. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And most out in the day, which arguably is probably always better to have a second set of eyes anyway. But hey, if you don't have that, that was what that book was about peaking, one rep max method. Loads of tons of great reviews. I get a lot of people from America using it and sending me emails. It's really cool.
Well,
it's nice. Yeah.
In the back, there is actually, when you said there about sort of you can take it away and implement it a little bit. There is actually, you put a little bit of the program in the back, didn't you, with instructions on and guidelines on how to use it, which I think, especially when it comes to people getting involved in powerlifting, people will find things like that and use them themselves, and it'll get to a point where, like you said there, they'll need a coach or a second pair of eyes. I know I have a coach myself. Yeah.
Bloody, don't they? It's like, it's very few people that ever really get to their full potential without a second set of eyes. And you know what? That's true in every sport. It's not just powerlifting. Don't think powerlifting is in this box by itself, because it's true of boxing, it's true of gymnastics, it's true of weightlifting. So why is it not true in powerlifting? It is true, isn't it? That of course, there are some people that are incredibly intelligent, have a real passion, and are genetically gifted and technically pretty good to get there as well. And those people, there are the exceptions that can make it to the top without coaches. But if you look at probably 99% of all the top people, they have got coaches. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, even as a coach myself, it's good there just to, because everyone thinks that, when you mentioned there about boxing and weightlifting and stuff like that, yes, everyone thinks it's an individual sport, but there's a much bigger team around that one person, especially when you get up to sort of, international level, because, there might be physios and all that sort of stuff to help them out. So yeah, completely agree. And when people are looking at programs to look at, I think the natural progression is, right, well, I've used the programs that I've seen and been recommended. Now I need to progress and sort of make it a little bit more specific to themselves as a lifter.
Yeah, totally. Which sometimes you kind of, and I guess you'd be the same as me, you kind of think, it'd be nice if a bit like weightlifting, the mentality was there a bit more, where people think straight away they might need a coach, because a lot of the times in the early days, it's exactly that, isn't it? If you can get someone early on and focus on making them a good technical lifter, you don't need to bore yourself too much with it later on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people get to intermediate level, or maybe even further, and then they get really frustrated because they're plateauing, or they're getting injured because of inefficiencies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, I'll let you follow.
So obviously, from where we've chatted before, and actually, it was actually great to see you handling at the British and at the All Englands as well. Just seeing how you were with your lifters on the day, and obviously when you're posting about the lifters that you're working with to work on technical issues and seeing them progressing, you are known for producing good technical lifters, and seeing them progress and go from intermediate to national level and so on. What have you found to be the main essential ingredients that for people getting involved in powerlifting, or are already in powerlifting but want to start seeing progress?
Yeah, I think if you're, I think the best, it's all about your start. And I think kind of touched on it a minute ago. If you're lucky enough to be somewhere like where you are based, where you can go and see a coach that can help you early on, then it's absolutely essential. Because in truth, like we both know this, right? Taking like coaching novice lifters as well. The truth is, and it kind of in the book, plug one, is, honestly, as long as you get them squatting, 2 to 3 times a week and benching 2 to 3 times a week. We're not saying super heavy. I'm not saying super heavy anyway. But as long as you get them in deadlifting, obviously as well, maybe once or twice, whatever it is, whatever you think their ability to handle volume is, which is going to be greater because the intensity is low. If you as a powerlifter can find yourself a good powerlifting club, or if maybe you're not ready to dip into having actual one-on-one coaching, or like online one-on-one coaching, weekly coaching, maybe maybe being amongst like-minded people and learning the sport is a really good way for you to go. But if you can do that early on and just building your technical proficiency, then honestly, you don't need the best program, because if you're a novice, a true novice, your progress will be linear anyway. You can almost add weight to that bar every week. And that's kind of the downfall that you see, in my opinion. Virtually every novice program that I've ever read isn't really a true novice program, in my opinion. So they're all about, in some ways, progressive overload, but it's chasing strength predominantly. But you'll find with most novice lifters, if you chase the technical, the mechanics, they can actually add weight to the bar anyway. You don't need any special program to do that. So what I think a few people have started calling these, that style of, and myself for many years, is acclimation. You're doing an acclimation phase. So in other words, that's if you're coming into it with very little experience on the main free lifts. If you're coming into it and maybe you've got good experience, relatively good, but you maybe got injured or gave up or got back into it, then it would technically be a repatterning phase, that you're looking at repatterning an old motor patterns to make it more efficient. And that's a great place to start, because you don't need the most sophisticated program at all for that. You just need really somebody, rather at the end of the Wi-Fi signal, or on a video or in person, giving you feedback about your technical ability to lift. Now, don't get me wrong, once you've ironed in relatively good mechanics, then if they're very smart, they will then start to program you so that you can keep that linear progression, or relatively linear progression, as you go along. So I guess to answer your question, incredibly long-winded like I always do, Steve, I think the most important thing initially is about understanding the rules and becoming technically proficient, because you don't have to go backwards. And, we have lost so many great lifters in this country who have been genetically monsters, but they haven't had the technique. And the truth of it is, we've also had some lifters that are really gifted when it comes to kinesthetic awareness about how their body's moving in space, so they can create movement well. And they also don't have a very good appreciation of mechanics. But guess what? They didn't need it, because they learned so well. You know what I mean? So it doesn't mean they aren't good technical lifters. They are. And I think that goes all the way back to coaches, where you think to yourself, in my case, coming from other sports that I was coached more than powerlifting, my best coaches weren't the best athletes in many cases. Actually, they were probably the worst ones. And I'll tell you why. The reason they were the best coaches is they learned the hard way. So then they could communicate with you very efficiently and very well how to best achieve optimal, whatever that is. You know what I mean? Mechanics, or in the sport, or technique, whatever it is. So that they would do that, and they would effectively be able to communicate really well. Whereas the most gifted coaches or gifted athletes I ever worked with, gifted athletes that were coaches that I ever was coached by, weren't necessarily the best coaches. Because a lot of it came easier. When I was like, I don't know, if it was anything like kickboxing or something like that, I was struggling. I was quite lucky, I'd learn things quite quick, but if there were things I was struggling with, and I'd ask the question, how are you doing this? Usually the worst athletes made the best coaches, because they could communicate and break down. But yet the best athletes I'm getting this the wrong way around. Effectively, the coaches that were great athletes, they said, well, you just do that. And you were like, well, but that's not helping me. I'm not learning. So I guess at the end of the day, what's the most important thing, essentially, to begin with, is having guidance. Whether that's you educating yourself so you learn more, so that you understand what you're trying to achieve, watch a lot of YouTube, a lot of videos, which is the harder way to do it. Or if you're very sensible and you're lucky enough to live near a club, or you just dive straight in and say, you know what, this is for me. I'm going to get a coach to work with on a personal level. I think that's the most important thing. Educating yourself first, but also looking at surrounding yourself and getting a great start, that you won't get injured, and you don't have to go back and restart.
Absolutely. What you said there about communication, what actually was ringing bells in my ear. It was actually today, so we were running a strength and conditioning. We run a strength and conditioning club, and it was deadlifts today. And I gave two different cues, if you like, to do it. And they both said, "Oh, we're doing the same lift." And it's like, yeah, but you need to know what's gonna be able to work for them. And yeah, I think I'm an all right, a power lifter, but I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to be able to push for international, because there's people out there strong. However, the people that I'm working with at the minute, exactly how you say, you want to educate them and communicate effectively, so that ultimately they're thinking, right, okay, I've actually got this. And I think a little bit more specific to powerlifting, but I think this can relate to other sports as well. You've got to learn how to do I think powerlifting and any sport that you do, it's a skill, and you've got to be able to do that skill appropriately. So like you say, you don't injure yourself. And I think powerlifting is one of the very few sports where by actually training, you get better at doing that skill. I think you touched on it a little bit there about it's always chasing strength. And it's like, I'll always tell the people that come to the powerlifting club or any of the lifters that I work with, record your lifts. Imagine that you're a machine designed to squat. Okay, the machine in the cogs, it doesn't turn once and then reset itself and then go again. It's the constant same repetition over and over and over again. So yeah, I completely agree with when you're saying there about technique. Is there any sort of you touched on it a little bit there about sort of body awareness and stuff like that? Is there any sort of priorities that you would focus on when it comes to technique?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying this for a long time, and I think it's starting, because I read a few posts the other day in America, and I thought maybe it's drifting over there. But something I've been really voicing for many years, and I think when it comes to technique, really it's about principles. And I posted it the other day as well. And in truth, really, one size doesn't fit all, but one principle does. And when we think about a principle, we're thinking about really what are we trying to achieve in powerlifting? Well, we're trying to create the most biomechanically efficient position to recruit the most amount of muscle, while achieving the least range of movement to accommodate the rules of the sport. Yeah. So in other words, if I can recruit more muscle mass, but I actually have to move less range of movement, that is the principle of what everybody's trying to chase. Now, how that actually looks can be very different. It could be someone with a very long femur could have quite a wide stance squat. Someone with smaller length femur could, squat, kind of mid stance hip width, whatever it is. But the truth is, that's the principle that I always try and chase. Now, again, there's also the thing that we have to accept, that the most biomechanically efficient position isn't always pretty, which is also very true, but we have to look at that within safe boundaries. So in other words, we know that obviously on a deadlift, that really a bit of rounding the back, we're shortening that moment arm, we're getting the mass nearer to us. Effectively, it can make the lift easier. But again, we have to think about safe boundaries. Yeah. So when we take that principle on board, we're thinking about really achieving the most biomechanically efficient position within safe boundaries to recruit the most amount of muscle, while achieving the least range of movement to accommodate the rules of the sport. Yeah. So if we're thinking along those lines, we're always going to build technically good lifters. You know what I mean? Because we're thinking, how can I get them to recruit more muscle to lift more weight? Simple as that. And also, how can I reduce the range of movement that they have to achieve to be able to hit the specifications of the lift? Yeah. And that's it. For me, that would be the overriding principle that I'm always trying to bring to everybody. Yeah. Of course, we've got to factor in lots of things there: individual anthropometry, the length of their arms, their legs, so forth, their mobility, their profile in general, like their injury history and so forth. All of that stuff is going to shape what that lift ends up looking like. Yeah. But of course, there's always principles that, me and you are going to do the same. Like, we're going to both, talk about bracing the core, holding tightness. These are fundamental aspects that any good coach is always going to say, that is key to the success of really building a lifter. But I do think that there's a lot of coaches, or a lot of lifters out there, as well as coaches, don't really, when they talk about, technique doesn't matter, does matter. They're not really thinking in the context of, but what is good technique? You know what I mean? What is it? You know, what constitutes good technique? Is it because I've got an opinion of what it is that I think it should look like that? No, of course not. It's about the principle. Mm-hmm. It's about the principle of recruiting the most muscle to lift the most weight, and you want to try and achieve the least range of movement to accommodate the rules of sport. That's the principle. And if somebody fits within that principle, perfect. You know, they're less likely. I mean, there's other aspects like not working. Obviously, if you're applying force that isn't against the force of gravity, it's wasted force, so forth. But again, that would be part of those principles that you're trying to bring in to lifting mechanics that are essential early on, or eventually you're going to get so far, or you have to revisit it probably later on when it becomes incredibly frustrating, and it becomes a lot harder to actually then relearn an old motor pattern so that you're repatterning an old motor pattern. Then you've got to be very efficient at programming to know how to do that. That's the problem. That I had a question the other day actually from a really great lifter was, okay, I see people getting better technically at 65, 75%, which is what I generally recommend. Trying to, you know, if you knew the percentage, trying to kind of work around to repattern an old motor pattern or learn something that you're not going much above it. You're doing multiple sets of low reps. So every rep's perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect, right? Yeah. So effectively, the question was, I see that all the time, but it breaks down very quickly when people go over 85, 90%, and you're like, that's so true. The amount of times I've coached or presented workshop seminars, and I've shown people little tweaks, and I've got them lifting a little bit better, and shown them where their inefficiencies are, and they've kind of clicked and the light bulb's gone on. They thought, okay, I get why that's happening. I understand why I struggle here now and where that inefficiency is. But then, of course, they expect that new motor pattern to set precedent over the old motor pattern next week when they're going to go for their max double. And you're like, no. You're only good at what you've done. If you've done something for 2 years and you've built relatively good strength levels, is this new way of doing it, because it's mechanically more efficient, going to be stronger than something you've done for 2 years? Nope, definitely not. That's when logical or rational programming is going to come into it, right? Where you're saying, okay, well, at the end of the day, this is, you can get, before the form breaks down with this new, more efficient mechanics that we've been showing you, the form breaks down at, let's say it's 80%, okay? But if we go over 80% for any length of time, if we go over, the form breaks down or reverts more. What will usually happen, reverts back to their old motor pattern. And that's really normal. And this is where the scary thing comes in for powerlifters, and they generally want to put their hands to their ears and go, no, I can't hear this. This is the thing that I always say before I actually try and repattern an old motor pattern with any lifter. And I have to get them to agree to it. Otherwise, I'm like, look, we're both pissing in the wind right now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I need to make you weaker before I can make you stronger. Mm-hmm. And if I don't have that buy-in, there's no point. So what I'm really looking at, put into context of programming, I've got to allow their old motor pattern to get weaker while I gradually push up the new motor pattern to set precedent. Yeah. Normally that can happen, I've found, with good external means of cueing and so forth, because it's the fastest way of learning stuff they've found now in lots of research. Yeah. And it will pretty much support that everywhere. But I generally, pretty much within 8 weeks, I'm normally at the point where I'm close. Of course, if they're a really advanced lifter, it might be longer. But you know, it's about 8 weeks, it's about the same. But if after a 12, you know, it's that long, sorry guys, but after 12 weeks, if I've maybe done a repatterning phase, a normalized phase, and then a functionalized phase, after that functionalized phase, I'm actually making it functional to the sport. So I'm going into those 85, 95%, yeah? At that point, usually the new motor pattern, almost always, will set precedent over the old one. Now, you go out there, learn great mechanics, a coach showed it, you spent a lot of time and effort, you also spent a lot of time and effort learning it, and then the moment you went heavy, it broke down. It's because ultimately you're not really understanding motor patterns, and the fact that if you do something for a very long time, it doesn't matter if it's inefficient, you become stronger at doing it.
Yeah.
That way really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we all see lifters out there, don't we, that are very strong but do it quite inefficiently. Now, if you could go back in time and get them to do it more efficiently, they would probably lift a lot more, and they would probably not plateau, and they would less likely to get injured because they're able to distribute the force throughout more muscles rather than not activate some and create too much force, and therefore likely to get injured. Their injury rate goes up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I say this all the time with, the majority of people that I'll train are those beginners going towards sort of intermediate. And a good thing that you said there about, sometimes that you have to become weaker to get a little bit stronger. Sometimes, taking a couple of steps back to take 5 or 6 steps forward is going to be a little bit better. But sometimes you find, I don't know whether you found this as well, that from especially for beginners, whether they're using probably before they've got a coach, using programs and working on their squat, bench and deadlift, and then they come and they start using a coach, if you like, and then it's like, oh well, hang on a minute, I've got a decent level of strength, why am I not being able to do this? But sometimes that little change in programming and change in thought process is actually what's going to help bridge the gap between being a beginner and an intermediate. Would you sort of agree with that?
I totally agree with it. I think recently a coach said to me a new analogy about like getting a little bit weaker to strong, and he used the analogy of a ladder. So what he said was, these mechanics will get you so high, but if you go down that ladder a bit and then get onto the other ladder, you can reach a much higher potential. Yeah. And I thought that was a great way of putting it. I kind of thought, I wish I would have thought of that. But yeah, I totally agree with you there. Yeah, totally and utterly. It is, at the end of the day, and the sooner you can do that, the better. Because, we often see it, and I think we're all at the stage now where powerlifting standards have gone up so much in the last few years that it's less likely now to find those lifters that come out of the woodwork that are just freakishly strong with poor mechanics because they're self-taught on every level, and they get right to the top. We used to see that, if you're as old as I am, you'd see that a lot post 10 years ago. They would come out the woodwork and just these strong guys, guys and women, to be fair. But now the standards are so high. What we do see, and we do see it still, we see these people come out of the woodwork every now and again that are just freakishly strong with poor mechanics. But everybody, most of the coaches kind of and will tell their athletes, you know what? I don't think they're going to be able to push much further than that. They've got to be at their capacity soon. And usually within a short period of time, they hit those plateaus, or worse yet, they get injured. The problem that you've got with it from a coach's perspective is, and this is what I've had over the years, and I won't say any names because I shouldn't, but I won't. But like not that long ago, I had a lifter and she was, so crazy strong. One of the best in the country. Really like the girl, super strong individual, but technically need a lot of work. But she would always, kind of say, oh, can you have a look at this? Can you have a look at that? I was more than happy to do it. Very nice person. I like her as an individual. But another coach said, you know what? You got it. You should start really coaching her. You should say she's one of the top. You should do it. And I said, no, do you know what? I'd like to, but at the same time, I need her to really want me to coach her and to basically come to me and saying, because Jesus Christ, the buy-in that I would have needed to step her back before I could step forwards. And this is a couple of years ago, but unfortunately, what I said to the coach at the time was, I think she's going to hit a limit here. You know what I mean? And she's going to need to go back big time. So I'll get her doing that. Whether or not she's ready to accept that, I said, there's no way I can take her on, because rather I'm going to make her a bit stronger, but she's already a freak, so she's probably going to get injured quicker. So if I'm programming her, where's my responsibility? You know what I mean? I'm programming her and I'm making her even faster, or even stronger. It's kind of like the reason I was thinking faster was I've got this not a bad, chassis car, and it's already got a powerful engine. All of a sudden I think, you know what, throw that engine away and let's put a Ferrari engine in there.
Yeah.
I haven't upgraded the suspension, I haven't upgraded the chassis, and I haven't even touched the brakes.
Yeah.
So anyone that races anything will turn around and say, all you're doing right there, buddy, is you're putting greater potential to smash that thing straight into the wall. Yeah. You might go faster for a very short period of time, but you're going to end up crashing.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It's exactly the same. Anybody, any good race team will say, look, sorry, mate, the engine's probably not going to be first on our list. Yeah. If you've got, suspension, you've got your chassis needs restructuring and re-strengthening, and your brakes, that will get you around the track, believe it or not, quicker. I know that because I've done a bit of racing, but it's true. And I remember years ago when I was doing a bit of stuff on the bikes, I remember thinking, you know what, this is very much like actually training people, but it's a motorbike. What the fuck? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's got a lot of crossovers, and I'll say to I think when people come in and they have that sort of raw strength, and every week they're adding kilos onto the total, or their lifts, or every competition they're getting crazy PBs. I think it is very hard to slow them down, and it's a little bit like when I first got involved in powerlifting. It's like, oh yeah, this is great. The weights are going to go up really quickly, and then all of a sudden, I'm happy with a 2.5 kilo PB, now, as opposed to a 10 or 15 kilo PB, and I think it's very hard to like what you said, change their mindset, or get their buy-in from that. But I think it's a great analogy about the engine in the car, because you're only as strong as your weak link. And the more I speak to other coaches such as yourself, and the more I learn and the more I read, and work on my own training, you've got to cover those bases, or else, if not, like you say, you've touched on it a couple of times there. Getting injured, because especially when people are going really strong and just cruising down, then all of a sudden it just, like that car analogy, it just crashes. It's a little bit like you can see people just not getting back involved in the sport, because they've had that injury, and they don't know whether they'll build back up to that.
And how bad was that crash? Hopefully not that bad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why that, the same gift of injury can come in for some lifters, that the injury is not that bad. It can make them rethink things. But there's also those people online, the keyboard warriors. Oh, why is it that everyone that talks about technique gets injured so much? Well, unfortunately, what usually happens is the people that are a little over the top about injuries are also the people that have got injured a lot and had to rework their technique.
Yeah.
I'm very passionate about, damn it, I wish someone would have shown me really good technique. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I'd probably fall into that category a bit myself.
Yeah.
But saying that, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, just kind of nattering on, there's a caveat to kind of our kind of speech as coaches, or what we're talking about as coaches and technique. But at the same time, you've also, for me as well, I do get lifters that are, very advanced sometimes, and you also can't ignore where they're strong and why they became strong. You know what I mean? So it really is a balancing act that at the same time, you might think it's a little inefficient, but they've become very strong. As long as I maintain or improve these inefficiencies slightly, why am I going to take away someone who's already an international record holder in this event? Do you know what I mean? They're already incredibly gifted. So at the same time, I think a lot of people sometimes look at me and go, oh, no, it's all about technique. It's all he gives a damn about. And like I say, I'll be honest, I'll hold my hand up. I have way too many injuries, and technically I wasn't a good lifter until much later on. I'm not sure I'd say I was ever a good lifter, but I wasn't a good technical lifter until later on. And even maybe there's still work to do for sure. But the point being that at the same time, we've got to, look at our strengths and work towards those, but accept our weaknesses and acknowledge them, and not just blank them out. And I think there's that level, isn't it? There's that, and it's hard to say, but it's an acceptable level. And I guess the acceptable level of not great technique is it dangerous? Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's the border, isn't it? That person happens to be very strong at doing something technically that may not be perfect, may not be, well, not that there is such a thing, but may not be great.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if they're very strong at it and it doesn't pose a risk factor that they might get injured, or it's very unlikely, there's only a small inefficiency. Personally, depending on the level of the lifter, if it was intermediate advanced, I might just tweak it. If it's an advanced, I would just always make them aware that this can't break down more.
Yeah.
If it's a novice, hey, why wouldn't I look at actually making the most efficient possible? So over their career, they're likely to get better gains and likely to stay injury-free without plateauing. Yeah, totally, I would do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's that thing of, I think for me, I was having a chat with one of the a lifter the other week, and it's a little bit basically he did a deadlift and it came up and it didn't look great. It looked like a little bit of an ugly lift. And afterwards, he said, "Oh, well, it went up." I said, "Yeah, it did." But I said, you know, if that was the case, if everything was left to be like that, then it would be you go to a competition, you get injured, have a couple of weeks out, start again, go to a competition, get injured, start it all over again. Whereas, yes, it's a little bit different, you know, when you are going maximal and, you know, if you're going to chip a PB, I completely understand that. But you've still got to get that technique dialed in a little bit more, or else you're just always just going around in circles and you're never going to be able to progress because there's always that little thing holding you back a little bit.
Yeah, it's like they say, Steve, and the best analogy based off of what you were saying, I totally agree. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Absolutely.
So in other words, if you can keep, and this is one of the things that I try to pride myself on as much as possible, you can keep the vast majority of your athletes injury-free and motivated and enjoying it and hitting sensible PBs, it is only a matter of time until they become champions.
Yeah.
Because by just the laws of average, people get injured, people get hurt. And the more they ignore that, and we all know that, you know, the good thing is about powerlifting, that strength, you don't just have to be this freak who's got phenomenal fast twitch muscle fiber. You know, you could have slow twitch, but as recent research shows, you can make slow twitch muscle fiber strong as well. So you can take these people that have got, you know, maybe, I don't know, their fiber type distribution is quite varied, let's just say that, and then give them good technique, and maybe they could never run, punch, or throw something as hard as this genetic fast twitch monster.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you can still make that person a champion. Do you know what I mean? And I'll be honest, I used to say this, I think years ago more so, because there's more technical. I mean, Jesus Christ, I used to talk about technique and I'd get absolutely hammered because nobody cared about it 10, 15 years ago. You know what I mean? Very few people gave a damn at all. So it wasn't people sat on the fence, just no one gave a damn, and there was just a handful of good lifters. but I used to say a lot, and I don't think it's fair for me to say it anymore because it's probably not really true in the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah. But basically, when it comes down to what I used to say was, I used to get a lot of weaker lifters, technically better, and just train them for a longer period of time and make my weaker, less genetically gifted beat these monsters. Yeah. Because they were able to recruit more muscle fiber because they did things mechanically more efficiently. And yeah, you could have tested that individual against my lifter on anything but the squat, bench, and deadlift, and they would have absolutely crucified my lifter. You could even look at my lifter and think, that person's not as strong as that person, but yet my lifter would win. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Not always, obviously, but they would often beat people that were much more genetic, had much better genetic potential than they did by a long way. And that's the cool thing about powerlifting, isn't it? That there's still room for that to happen to a degree, even now, where you don't have to sit on the sideline and think, oh, well, I'm not, I couldn't choose my parents, so what my genetics are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, well, you don't. I think as well, that sort of attitude's the wrong attitude anyway. It's like, look, you should be doing this for yourself anyway, and it's about improving, and that's all that matters, really.
Yeah, especially for people, people listening who are just sort of getting involved in powerlifting. That's the whole point of it, and you want to be trying to push yourselves and get stronger. And just in the terms of, technical lifters against those freaks that are out there, if you like. I've been watching Eric Cressy's sort of shoulder course, if you like. And when you look at a couple of his videos, he's got obviously slogans around his gym. Looks like an awesome gym. I'd love to go. And say again.
He's got two. Has he still got the one? I actually spent time with Eric a few years ago.
Oh, nice.
One in Hudson still, and one in Florida now. Two.
Right. I'm not sure which one the course is in, or which one the gym that he's in. But he's got like slogans around his gym, and there's one, and he was doing a video, and actually I ended up looking at the slogan behind him, and it said it's something, when talent fails, hard work wins. Or do you know the phrase that I'm on about?
Do you know what? No, I can't think of it.
It's a really good phrase, and I was watching one of the videos today, and I can't think where it was, but basically it was sort of, because a lot of people, when we're saying there about, it's not always the case that technical lifters will beat these people that are, genetically gifted, but the main thing with anything, if you try and achieve anything, is consistency. And sometimes it's a little bit like we were chatting about this at the gym, and you look at sort of the superstars in team sports or anything like that, and they might have that touch of magic, if you like, but there's, like, say, in football or rugby, there's 10 other guys around them that play in, week out, and still maintain at that high level. In powerlifting, there might be people that are in the middle of the pack in the national level or international level, and all it takes is that little bit extra push, that time over time, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, okay, so this guy's challenging.
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure he won't mind me. And to be honest, he'll just beat me up if he does mind. Tony Cliff comes to mind, because Tony's always been a phenomenal British lifter, right? But he came up with like Ben Banks, like they were both battling for a place on the team equipped back then, right? And they both pushed each other really hard. But the thing with Tony is that what you've seen with Tony is that he's been on that international level, always at kind of better, close to the top end. But you know what Tony's done? He's got phenomenal heart, phenomenal work ethics. He's obviously, genetics. He's relatively well endowed there, but he wasn't the top front runner for a while. I remember one time, I think it was 2015, and I remember when he was competing against Mike Teixeira, and I remember overhearing the American coaches going, "Oh, where did Tony come from? Where did Tony come from? He's not usually there." And sure enough, but Tony just there. He keeps going. He's got phenomenal heart, phenomenal work ethics, and boom, he goes and does it. And congratulations to him as well.
I must admit that was great to see when he did it. It was really, really good to see. And I watched the bit where he got presented with the medals, and I don't think no one else in the world was as happy as him. Then it was really, really good to see.
I reckon I was close. I remember talking to him before it, going, "I'm so buzzing about this, Tony."
It was good to see. So obviously we've chatted a little bit there, delving into sort of the only as strong as people's weak links and how to get people stronger. And we chatted a little bit at the start, and we can dive into a little bit more of focusing on those weak links. So obviously, we chatted a little bit on the phone before the podcast about things that people might forget as they become intermediate and want to progress on, and people who are beginners who come into powerlifting and don't realize these bases need to be covered. So what are some of the key factors or things that you would work on to keep that are often overlooked when it comes to getting people stronger?
I think we kind of touched on it a bit. Is always, the first thing is focus on the principle, which is like about, creating the most biomechanically efficient position and so on. So looking at that, that would be primary. Outside of that, it generally is going to be a case of looking at limiting factors. Where are the weak links in the chain and not ignoring them. And I think when it comes down to that, you'd be looking at, different approaches about how you might program that or achieve that to make sure that you can catch up the weak links in the chain. But I think once you've you've dialed in nice mechanics, because if I'm talking about novice intermediate, obviously, if I'm talking about intermediate advanced or advanced, it might be a balancing act because I don't want to step them too far back neither. But yeah, I think the key thing is look at weak links. Don't just think that I just need to keep doing the movement over and over again, adding more weight, doing it more times a week, increasing my frequency. I think that can work for a short period of time, but usually people do get injured and then they have to reset and try and go with a slightly slower progress can actually end up much greater progress in the long run. So I think trying to identify where the weak links are in the chain and trying to catch those up. Analogy I sometimes use is isolate and integrate. I didn't come up with that, but so you might isolate the weakness out and then integrate it into the primary sport movement. Is always a good way to do that. I don't know. I'll put it into some context. Let's just say it was somebody doing a squat and they had a chest ball pattern. Now, first thing that I actually want to, because it just popped in my head, first thing I should say is that we all say straight away, oh yeah, you got weak quads. Normally, weak quads, maybe even gastrocnemius calves, but either way, yeah, it could be. But before you jump to that, don't just jump there. You might want to watch bar path. And the problem that we've got is if you take somebody that's maybe a low bar squatter, of course, if you think about it, the bar actually does start behind midfoot. You know what I mean? If you take a plumb line, the bar is behind midfoot. Yeah. So if effectively they're the sort of lifter like a lot of people have been told to be, I've got to be bolt upright because they think low bar, but they still think bolt upright. That's like maybe a kind of novice, intermediate kind of mindset there. So then all of a sudden you've got this bar that's doing this. And of course, if I throw a ball like that, where does it bounce? It's got momentum, right?
Yeah.
So it's a bit like the chicken and the egg. Is it weak quads or is it momentum from the mass moving forwards because the bar's having to track towards midfoot? Which one is it? And usually what happens is one dictates the other. That if you've been doing that for long enough, you actually might have weak quads. Egg theory, right? Yeah. Because your quads aren't that strong because they never go for a good plane. They never extend fully. They're shifting back to put all the emphasis back onto hip extension, right? So in the end, you think to yourself, okay, so what is it? Is it one or the other? The truth is, first thing is, again, clean up the inefficiency. Yeah. If there is an inefficiency, and then look at making the muscle stronger. Or better yet, if you can do both at the same time, all the better, which you should be able to do programming-wise. But don't jump straight to, I've got a horrible good morning squat, therefore I've got weak quads. Yeah. So therefore, I'm going to go and I'm just going to do front squats, high bar squats, sissy squats, lunges, anything that's going to build my quads, and then and that will fix that. Because the simple truth is this, is if it's an inefficiency in the bar path, that the bar's tracking behind midfoot and gaining momentum to get to midfoot, because the mass will want to go there. Obviously, depending on how much the lifter weighs and how much weight's on the bar, that's going to change again. But let's just say they're reasonably strong, they're not super heavy, which in the end, we all hope to have double body weight, right? Yeah. So if we're saying that, then we know that roughly midfoot is where the mass should be, roughly, for nearly everyone. Maybe somebody needs 2.5 times body weight for that to happen, but whatever, right? In a rough gauge, let's just say that's the case. So we know that the bar's going to start behind midfoot. So if we lower down, we're trying to stay too upright, the mass is going to travel us towards midfoot. Yeah. It just is. It's going to take you there to where the center wants to be over the mat. So the mass wants to be over the center, boom. And then you've got that momentum, which shoots you up to the other side, which is great if you can see my hand, not if you can't, if you just listen verbally. But it's very obvious. So at the end of the day, now think about this. If I do even if I do front squats, but let's take high bar. If I suddenly go, right, high bar, I want your quads to get stronger, that might make them even more upright.
Yeah.
So now when they revert back to low bar squatting, they're definitively tracking that bar really quite far behind midfoot because they've changed the bar position. So now when it gets really heavy, they're going to have an even bigger deviation.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe it might be slightly offset that they did build stronger quads, but you certainly didn't really address the problem. And what is it? What is it that you've just done? That's pacification. You know what I mean? You've only treated the symptom, not the cause.
Yeah.
So ultimately, first look at it and think, what is the real cause? Usually it can go hand in hand, no denying that. But meaning that, so I guess weak links, and that's what I was saying, is find the cause. Try and find the cause of the weak link. Again, good coaches will help you looking at good lifters and just trying to understand why that is an efficient squat, bench, or deadlift can also help where you can start to suss this stuff out. But for instance, looking at that, you might take that and say, okay, the bar path's pretty good. You know, the bar path is what it should be with the low bar, which is drifts a little bit to begin with, gets over midfoot. That's because you've adapted the torso angle and keep adapting it to maintain it relatively over midfoot when the weight is reasonably heavy. Of course, if it's light, it will balance differently because technically the mass doesn't necessarily have to be, it could be slightly in front of midfoot, and that actually is correct. But when the weight's reasonably heavy, it will roughly be over midfoot. So if that is the case, then yeah, you've just probably identified weak quads. So yeah, you're going to think to yourself, okay, now if they know low bar and their motor pattern is fixed, it's ingrained, then I might go to high bar. But you'll see a lot of my lifters, I do give them high bar, but I only give it to the lifters that are that at any point I go, right, switch to low bar. And they can show me good mechanics. Yeah. Because what I don't want is the high bar, because it's a very close variant, to change the mechanics of the low bar. So I don't want it to almost corrupt the motor pattern that's been ingrained.
Yeah.
So I would do it if I'm confident the lifter can switch from high bar to low bar and there's a definitive mechanical change and they're tracking the bar correctly over midfoot when it's quite heavy. Then I'd quite happily do that. But if I'm not sure, I might just go, you know what, front squat, because it's a big enough difference that they're not going to confuse the motor pattern that we're trying to achieve on the low bar squat.
Yeah.
And then there's also people who say, oh yeah, but it doesn't really make much difference, you know, low bar, high bar. And you're like, yeah, well, the truth is we know that that's not 100% true, because if you're a high bar squat, if you're a low bar squat and you do some high bar, where do you ache? Your quads are on fire, right?
Yeah,
so you know there's a difference mechanically, and vice versa. You take a high bar lifter and you switch them to low bar, and they're like, Jesus Christ, I can feel my adductors, my glutes, my hamstrings. You know, we know probably more adductors and hamstrings, but we know that there is a difference, even if it's not that big. But if it's 10-15%, it's enough. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It goes back to what we were saying before about, you know, how technique is so important. And just when there is any of those breakdowns that you mentioned there, and you obviously mentioned a couple of accessory exercises, where sort of implementing accessory exercises, your thoughts on them. Is it a case of you would just add maybe one or two in, or just to help these issues, or is it a case of sometimes it is just right, let's forget about accessory exercises, we're just going to focus on the actual squat pattern, a little bit more of a technical session, if you like? Where do you sort of land with the accessory stuff?
Yeah, cool. So I think the first thing is I'm defining terms, because obviously people use different terms. That for me, I would classify anything that is a very similar motor pattern to the primary exercises as assistant, because it assists those, and anything that's very different as an accessory. And I'll give you an example. Let's say a pull-up or a shoulder press is an accessory in my book. I'm not saying it's right, because I know everyone uses slightly different terms, just the way it is. And an assistant exercise might be, okay, a squat, but actually it could even be a box squat is an assistant to a squat itself, right? So I guess your question, just to reiterate your question. Sorry, Steve. Remind me your question now that I know.
About accessory exercises, where would you fall? Where would you fall on those when it comes down to progressing lifters?
Yeah, how I would put them in, I think you were saying as well.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I think the more novice you are, the more specific you want to be to begin with. Because I think it kind of changes. That I would do squat, bench, and deadlift and make that the priority, because that's going to be about mechanical efficiency.
Yeah.
Now, as you become slightly less novice, a bit more towards intermediate, then you start to see, because the weights are going up, you'll start to see the weak link. And at that point, assistant exercises will start to play a slightly more dominant role in your programming. And then obviously as well. So I guess if I was looking at novices, I tend to do, this is my opinion totally, I would tend to be quite specific on the main movements being the priority. Yeah. And I'd be looking at accessory work to build the foundations, like, those small intrinsic muscles of the shoulders, like the, rotator cuff musculature and so forth. Maybe building a good foundation, like good core strength, so that eventually you can lift more weight. Maybe even transverse plane training, so that, that they've got really good core strength from frontal plane, because that the more advanced they become from a novice, the more it's going to be more sagittal, unless after competition you might step them back and do more of a GPP, general preparation block. But then as they become slightly less novice, I would then start to have those assistant exercises play a bigger role. Because now I'd probably also be able to, and they might be able to start to identify where their real weakness is, because they've got the technique done. They've also laid a good foundation with the accessory that even if you just say, you know what, accessory work, I need to do core, I need to do rotator cuff musculature, I need to just do basic accessory work. And even if you just, as a novice, just took it on and then did the main lifts, then after that, you might start to then see they've got a greater genetic potential, that their quads are very strong, their glutes are quite weak, or the other way around. So then you start to pick up those nuances about which assistant exercises are best complementing their primary movements. Yeah. And you've also built a really great foundation, great brakes, great suspension, great chassis, with all the accessory work that maybe, again, isolate, and now you're starting to integrate that stuff. Yeah. So then novice intermediate would play a slightly more dominant role to that assistant exercises that target their weak links that they've got. While you're still understanding the accessory exercises still need to be there. You need to maintain good structural balance, so that the likelihood of injury is low. But then as they're going maybe to intermediate advanced, then you might start getting a little bit more specific again, where actually now if you've done a good job, you've ironed out a lot of these weaknesses, and you can actually run, more specific programs that are maybe more Eastern Bloc kind of mentality, where it is quite specific. And that's why these guys did that, because they built really great lifters. They did all the work early on. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then we all look at their programs and go, well, why can't I do small off without blowing my shoulders out or whatever? It's like, well, hang about, these guys built a phenomenal foundation before they were doing that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. You touched on it there as well, sort of, which, what you said there, working on those weak links, and we've chatted about it before, and you mentioned it there, sort of the core strength and stability, and working on the I think you've said before about, which can sometimes be overlooked, sort of stabilizers, neutralizers, and fixators, the real small things that, like you said about, the Eastern Bloc will have worked on before. Why are those so important? And do you just want to expand a little bit about what, the core stability is, those stabilizers, neutralizers, fixators are, and how you would lay that foundation to then be able to progress and get stronger?
Yeah, so if I turn them as, the neutralizers, stabilizers, and fixators as synergists, that they indirectly assist the prime movement, as just a very broad way of describing them and throwing them all together. So if I look at that side of it, okay, so the first thing is this. let's take a bench because it's an easy way to kind of, give you a good example. When I'm looking at bench pressing, let's say I've become quite strong in my prime movers, my pecs, my anterior delt, my triceps, and I'm shifting a lot of weight. But let's say my synergists, my rotator cuff musculature is not that strong, which can happen. I had this problem myself many years ago, and it's weakened. So I'm lacking structural balance. So therefore, I'm more prone to injury. But also the other thing you've got to think about, if these small intrinsic muscle groups aren't doing what they should be doing, fixating, stabilizing, neutralizing, if they're not doing what they should be doing, then what you're going to have happen in the glenohumeral joint is you're going to get movement that isn't necessarily good movement, and it maybe a glide anteriorly. You're going to get around that. We've got proprioceptors in the joint. Those joint proprioceptors are going to effectively pick up signals that the joint isn't tracking correctly and is in danger. They'll then send signals to the brain. The brain unconsciously will send inhibitory signals to the prime movers, your pecs, your anterior delt, your triceps, basically telling them to turn down. So you actually can't even lift as much weight. Why? Because you didn't understand that you needed to look at those accessory exercises as being the foundation to build everything on. That you just completely you bypassed it. So the chances, and of course, the stronger you are able to, and of course, we all know that with weight training, there'll be less inhibition because, our joint receptors will turn down. But regardless, we kind of want the joint receptors telling us when things are dangerous, right? Because otherwise, we're not going to have a very long career. Absolutely. If we can just like completely, bypass these receptors that are there, these proprioceptors, joint receptors, and everything else that comes with it, the ligaments, tendons, But so we need to look at strengthening those so that we can keep progressing, but also so we can actually get full neural drive to the prime movers to lift more weight. Because if your joints are saying, no, there's danger here, they will send inhibitory signals. That's what they do, guys. That's why we got joint receptors, proprioceptors, So that's why, you look at that. And core's not that different, in the sense that, I know there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there that said, you don't need to do any core work. If you squat or you deadlift, your core's already strong. To some degree, that's a little bit true. But you know what they found in research is that in reality, your core, your posterior aspect of your core is strong, but not necessarily your anterior aspect of your core. So again, really, if you can build that strong core, then you're less likely to have those inhibitory signals, even if you don't give a damn about injury, you know what I mean? Or the prevention of injury, that you're less likely to be able to fire up neurally to your full potential if those joint receptors or any of those receptors, proprioceptors, sense danger. So on that sense, you really do have to come at it a more holistic approach about trying to build those foundations. I think that pretty much answers the question.
It does, and I'm gonna. We don't mind a little bit of a tangent, just taking from what you've said there, and obviously we've said a lot about injuries, and as we've said about as beginners get involved and they're getting weight on the bar and always progressing, and I think sometimes when people find programs online or use different programs, a little bit like what you said there about the Eastern Bloc programs, they are out there. You can find them and you can do them, but they don't take into account that those programs might have been designed for people who have been training a little bit longer and already laid those foundations. When it comes about missing the core strength and stability and all the small things that you need to find and work on, is it a case of sort of their muscles, if you like, are progressing too fast, and then your tendons and your ligaments and all that sort of stuff just say, whoa, hang on a minute, I can't actually do that? Because sometimes you can have it. I had it when I hurt my back after the British last year in December. It turned out that I've ended up having to do a little bit more core work because it's one of those things that I just overlook. Is it often that like that car analogy, everything's progressed too fast and everything else just can't catch up.
Yeah, and you've created an imbalance of some sort. So we can pretty much guarantee that, like your core strength, you're a powerlifter. Your posterior aspect of the core, like the spinal erectors, all that, are going to be strong. But was your anterior aspect, was your transverse strong? Was the internal, external oblique strong enough? Or, chances are they probably weren't, and you created that imbalance. So the moment you created that, your risk potential went right up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, that's why, we do need to look at that. And that's why I was kind of saying that, early on with novice lifters, doing the primary movements quite a lot, but not necessarily chasing weight on the bar too much, and doing the accessory work so important. And it's kind of one thing that I didn't say that I probably should have said was, I often see these young lads now, because it's the PlayStation generation, as I call it anyway, that sometimes don't have a very good sports background, but because you might be doing a good job programming, their strength levels in the sagittal plane go up quite quickly.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the foundation that I might have going out playing climbing, or a kid doing judo or gymnastics did.
Yeah.
So in that case, you might need to prioritize, like you said, more core work. And again, profiling the lifter is so key to working out, like, what background did they come from? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How they present themselves.
Yeah.
Really,
Absolutely. I think it was funny. After watching sort of the worlds recently, and I can't remember who I was having the conversation with, but Taylor Atwood, for example, he's won a world championship, but he actually came from an American football background and actually playing sport before. Whereas I think sometimes people can get involved in powerlifting and get involved in the gym because obviously they want to get bigger, or whatever it might be, which is good. But when you look at some of the people or some of the top athletes out there, they have a wide range of they've played different sports, and I can't remember whether it was a Mike Boyle quote or something like that. And it's sort of, especially when kids are sort of growing up, just let them play loads. They don't have to get specific yet, because they don't need to. You need to do those different movements.
No, I totally agree. And you see this as well with, I guess it's been a little bit of the change in fashion of programming that in the last 5 to 10 years, that there's probably less juniors making it through the ranks than what they used to be.
Right.
And that's because maybe they've become too specific too soon. You know what I mean? A lot of people are talking about that, and I wouldn't disagree that they reach such great levels so early, but maybe they hit them too early, that maybe they needed to build bigger foundations to hit bigger peaks, and maybe they were capable of far more. A lot of them get injured now. You do see that they don't have the careers that they did. Yeah.
It is interesting when you look at it, and again, we've referred back to it, or we've referred back to it a couple of times. Is it bases down on that getting that technique right, but then also, again, I think it all. You said it at the start. It's not just specific to powerlifting. It's across the board for when people are getting involved in everything. Another thing, sort of, obviously, we've spoken about the technique, the working on your weak links, and you're only as strong as that. When it comes to actually the discipline side of things, if you like, maybe the things outside of the gym, what are your thoughts on sort of recovery and nutrition, and how that actually impacts progress? Because maybe not so much. I know when I first started out, I was actually still playing rugby at the same time as I was training for powerlifting. And then it got to a point where, I was feeling sore after a rugby session. I would then try and do a powerlifting session and feeling even more sore. Then it got to a point where, right, I needed to prioritize one or the other. So what are your thoughts on, the things that you should be doing outside of the gym, and how it relates to as people progress through as lifters?
Yeah, and I think that was the thing. Again, this is plug 2, by the way. I think the discipline side of it is, in the book, I kind of outline the 4 essentials, and really, in no particular order, you'd say mobility, technique, maximal strength, of course, that's the sport, and discipline. And discipline would be, super, super important. And I think it's about your day-to-day week to week, month by month discipline that really makes the big difference. And, you know, all of that comes into it when you said nutrition, hydration, sleep, all of that stuff. The better you're able to do that, you're not going to find in many cases, not unless you just don't drink water, but overall, if you're doing things okay, then you'll make okay progress. You know, with all things being right, you'll make pretty good progress. But if you're able to do those things really, really well, and that's where the discipline comes in about maintaining all of those aspects and much more, your progress will be at the best level possible. So your coach or yourself or whoever it is can effectively go, good, let's put a bit more weight on the bar. Do you know what I mean? Because you're recovering better, and therefore you're seeing those returns much better, and the likelihood of diminishing returns becomes less because it's more optimal because you're gaining more. So I think the discipline side of it is something that for a lot of people, I think in the end, and I think for myself maybe a bit as well, is that actually I kind of liked having some discipline. And if you can gravitate towards that, it can help you in your lifestyle a lot, especially if you're out drinking or partying or whatever it is a lot. Then, you know, you can do that sometimes with other sports, not so much now. We did back in the day, but with powerlifting, yeah, you've got to look at all these factors, like you said, stress, you know what I mean, sleep, hydration, nutrition. All of these things become super, super, super important when it comes down to, you know what I mean, how to really, really progress. Yeah. And I think ultimately, if you're missing those aspects, then some of those aspects, then you're slowing your potential down. If you're completely and utterly not giving a damn about them, then you're opening yourself up to really not progressing, plateauing, and potentially injuring. But I also think discipline comes into as well, that being objective, being disciplined enough to be honest and objective about your lifting, your mobility, you know, how things are going, the right weight to go on the bar, the right amount of sets to do before you beat yourself up or you're not doing enough. And things change. That's the really tough thing, because you might go into powerlifting and think, well, my mobility is absolutely fine for all of the lifts. Maybe it could be a bit better here on that one, but it doesn't negatively affect me. So I'm okay, but that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. Do you know what I mean? You might need to be disciplined enough to be objective to realize then when your warm-ups need to change because you've been in it for long. I've had this conversation recently with a few of my lifters that were maybe novice intermediate and now more intermediate advanced, or knocking on the door of intermediate advanced. And they would keep trying to do these warm-ups that they might have done when the load on the bar was a lot less. And you're like, you know, maybe you want to look at adding in a bit more mobility. And, you know, here's where we're going to warm up. Where do you find that you're a bit achy, right? And let's see where the restrictions are. And then we add in a bit of mobility, a little bit more warming up, and then get back under the bar. And they're, oh, yeah, but coach, you know, I feel a little bit tired. And you're like, well, it's better than being injured. And eventually your capacity will improve anyway. Yeah. So, you know, it's kind of like watching a master lifter, a good master lifter that's been around for a while. They might have to do a fucking lot of stuff before they start lifting. You know what I mean? Yeah. But yet the young gun might just go, just get under the bar, just throw 20 points on. You know what I mean? So I think we need to be disciplined enough to be very objective about what we need at what point in our lifting. Yeah. But the discipline comes from the day-to-day, week-to-week, month by month, because ultimately that's where you get your results, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back to what we said before about, you know, consistency, and over time, you know, you just got to keep working at it. Do you find that as when a lifter is working with a coach, you know, when they're just starting out, once obviously all the technique and the programming side of things have been taken care of, do you find as though it just becomes a little bit more of a point of actually just managing the lifter as opposed to, you know, focusing on technique? You're never going to go away from that, but do you find as you progress and the lifters that you work with that it's actually, you know, managing them as a lifter, you know, psychologically, how they're feeling and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, definitely, Steve. I think when it's funny, really, the way I look at it is when you take a lifter first on, you need to be the coach with me. What means that you need to be out front and you need to kind of give them what they need to do. And it has to be that they're prepared to do it. But then as they get better, it becomes almost more like a friendship or more like you're guiding them. And that's because their knowledge has increased. They've got relatively, good experience. So ultimately, the more advanced they get, the more you're like a second set of eyes, and you're offering them solutions to the problems they might encounter, but also keeping them accountable. And then, of course, keeping them accountable and being honest, which isn't always that easy to do, where you can say, look, the truth is you were fucking that shit up. You know what I mean? And I told you that, and now look what's happened. And trying to be somebody's friend all the time isn't a good way to manage. Like from a sports perspective, isn't a good thing. You'd like to be with my more advanced lifters. I'm on more friendship terms, and effectively they know that I'll be honest with them. I'm keeping them accountable, and I'm maybe controlling their programming and tweaking their technique. But definitely, I'm like you said, I'm nowhere near as involved as somebody who's novice. But also, if they're a novice lifter, I need a complete buy-in, or maybe even new to me, but I need a complete buy-in. I need them to do it. If they overthink things too much, they might actually have, when it comes to, like, you see this all the time, you're going to have this, we all have it as coaches, they're novice intermediate. Sometimes they've read a bloody article somewhere, and you think, oh, for fuck's sake, I just wish they hadn't read that article. Yeah. The article was right, but because their lack of knowledge, not always the article's right, but nowadays there's half-decent information out there. Yeah. But then you have to say, but tell me, in what context was that? You know what I mean? Yeah. And actually, a good one is this. I just had a lifter, I'm going to try and make sure I avoid names again, come back from a relatively, an international, but she's quite new to it, but she's got a good, she's genetically well endowed in certain lifts, so she's done pretty well for herself very quickly. But of course, she talked to one or two of the coaches there who offered her really good sound advice. But was it in the right context? And this is where I like to think that when people ask me advice, I'll always say, in what context? Do you know what I mean? So the problem is she's now going to another international pretty much back to back. And she was like, so I don't understand why I was doing a slightly, in my last block, it wasn't as heavy as I usually would in my SPP block. And I'm like, because on that movement, I'm actually going to have to peak you twice. So would I want to do a really 3 heavy blocks in one movement? And she's like, does it sound smart to you? And she was like, no. And I went, you know what 3 heavy blocks in a row gets you, don't you? And she was like, no. And I went, normally injured or in progress. So I was like, so I kind of had to go from a very, very easy SPP block, if you like, to a peak. Whether she likes to go from a slightly heavier SPP to a peak. But the problem is with that movement, I had to peak her twice. So I couldn't do 3 blocks of heavy. It made no sense, and it would have risked injury. Yeah. But of course, the advice was, maybe you want to do a slightly heavier SPP coming in. It's like, that'd be great if we didn't have another international 4 weeks later. And which was the most important one? Oh yeah, the one after. Yeah. You know what I mean? And she's like, I kind of get this now. Like, yeah, you can see the advice was very good advice. Mm-hmm. But it just wasn't applicable, and it wasn't in context based on what her needs were. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and it's like what we said at the start. It's based on the individual, and as people progress, I mean, I like it when people go out and read articles and that sort of stuff. But some of the stuff that they read, exactly what you say, is it relevant to you? Is it going to be? Is it going to help you? Because if it isn't, then right, we don't really want to. We don't really want to focus on that. Just when you've said there, sort of, when you've touched on sort of competitions, after covering it feels as though we've done like a step-by-step approach coming to sort of, when people are actually ready to step on the platform, if you like. Yeah. What is sort of, what's the best way to say this? From beginners all the way through to pending what you're doing, what are your tips for when it comes to actually competing? Because correct me if I'm wrong, when people are going in, everybody wants to get a PB on there. So like competing tips to be like, right, what's a good process to follow so that, when all the technique that we've worked on, we've had the discipline of focusing on recovery and nutrition, when it all comes together on the platform, what sort of a good go-to plan or tips to make sure that you're successful?
Yeah, cool. So again, my advice there would be profile yourself and be objective. So if you're a novice lifter, your goals are going to be very different from an intermediate or advanced, and they should be. Your goals should be to become a better game day lifter, to become very skilled on the platform. Why? Because that's what's going to serve you invaluable, and that you're likely as a novice lifter to be making your rate of progression is going to be pretty damn good. So that means you can probably get on the platform, in my opinion, I would, more often to build your game day skill. Because as you get stronger, inevitably, again, the laws of diminishing return mean that, you're not going to gain as much strength over time when you're very advanced. That's just the nature of it, because you're nearing your genetic potential or whatever, right? So you wanted to build that game day skill early on, because you might only be competing 2 or 3 times a year to actually make any significant gains on the platform. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, if you're a novice lifter, my advice is get on the platform as soon as you think you can hit okay PBs. Don't wait a year until they're massive, because also that's a lot of pressure. You want, and Jesus, the amount of people I've seen over the years, one competition, haven't competed for a year and a half, and now they've added 100 and something on one lift, 80 on that, but the pressure is immense. They've got game day skill as a one-time lifter.
Yeah.
That's rubbish. I mean, if you let's take boxing or any combative sport, any coach would laugh in your face and say, I know the skill requirement might be more, but still they'd laugh in your face, because you said, right, I had one fight, I waited a year and a half, and now I'm going to go in against a professional fighter. They'd go, are you fucking joking? You know what I mean? They'd like, why are you doing that? Why didn't you have a couple of fights build up to that? What's wrong with you? You might be somebody who's done really well. You've had one competition, and now you're actually a really good intermediate lifter a year and a half later. You're actually pretty good. But you've put yourself in so much pressure to do this on the platform. Your game day still sucks. You know what I mean? And you walk away really disappointed. The other thing is doing more competitions as a novice lifter as you're gaining strength and building that skill will actually make you enjoy the process. You don't want to be, again, one of those lifters. Those lifters fall into the category of, oh, I did one competition, now I'm doing my second one a year and a half, 2 years later, whatever it is. I've made all these gains. I'm amazing. I'm comparing myself to easily, I might be in the top 3 in England or something like that, whatever it is, I don't know. I'm easily this good. But then when you see them on the platform, they're an absolute mess. You know what I mean? And I don't think so. It might be strong, but he can't display it or she can't display it.
Yeah.
And it's a real shame, because after that experience, what does that make them? It makes them a worse game day lifter, because now every time they're going to compete, they've got this inherent oh my God, hey, listen, the lifters that usually go 9 out of 9, and also the lifters that go 9 out of 9 regularly are the lifters that usually go 9 out of 9. Yeah. Because it's not arrogance, it's just the fact that they've become accustomed. They are used to succeeding. But yet the lifters that don't do very well go into it thinking, I might not do very well. And they generally don't do very well. And so my advice, if you're kicking off, do lots of competitions. Don't go too mad, but definitely you want to be looking at minimum of 3, really up to 5 competitions a year if you're a novice. Really, just go and have fun. Don't put pressure on yourself. That's one of the big tips. Remember, your first competition, it doesn't matter what you lift, everything's a PB. That's it. In powerlifting, nobody gives a damn who come last, unless it's a national championship, no one gives a damn who comes 2nd or 3rd, right? The only person that anyone ever remembers, unless it's a national, and they might remember who come 2nd, 3rd, outside of that is who won it. It doesn't matter. That's not the sport. The sport is about self-improvement on many levels. So Go in there, enjoy the process. Nobody gives a damn if you were the fifth best, you know what I mean, or the last, or the second. Not at a divisional level. No one gives a damn, really. You know what I mean? It's nice to take a medal home with you or a trophy and win it, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. It's about progression. So my advice is compete as you think you've got PBs. Don't wait until you've got loads of PB, like such huge gains. It's incredible. And don't underestimate the skill of being a good, a great game day lifter. It's so important to the success of lifters, because if you've built that early on, when you're at the top end and you maybe made it to a national and you could win it, or an international, you won't fall to bits, because you know how to deal with it. And on top of that, it allows you to really enjoy competing. It kind of competing at anything, when you get good at it, is a bit like going on a roller coaster. You kind of want to, it's going to be scary. There's going to be nerves, but at the same time, in a weird way, you're going to enjoy it. And that's what you do it. But if you go into your first competition and you have an okay day, you wait a year and a half later and you do terribly, and then your next comp's not great neither, you don't, that process isn't enjoyable. So you want those weird kind of nerves where you're a little bit worried, a little bit scared, a little bit nervous, but it's an enjoyable thing. The feeling after the competition is very much euphoria, that you're going to, you're really glad you put the time and the effort. You walk away and, you're buzzing about it and you've had a lot of fun, So don't put pressure on yourself. Compete relatively often if you're a novice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The same rule applies. I've had lifters over the years, even though most of them now I fight it as much as I can, that are quite advanced lifters that want to compete too much because they're invited to this competition here and this Arnold's over there and this, that, and I'm going, no, I want to make gains, So if you're more intermediate advanced, don't think that you've got to get on the stage and take every opportunity to win everything, because I've had lifters that have limited their gains because of that, because they've been invited to all these prestigious internationals. But when was the time they were actually getting stronger?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they were, they needed more foundation to, chase volume and get under the bar and build the capability to display more strength, not just peak after one peak. You're not, unless you're very, very novice, you're not likely to gain there. So yeah, there'd be my general tips. The other stuff would be, like the stuff that you always kind of go on about, training to the standard of a competition, get commands, get commands on all your singles or even on your first reps in doubles or triples. Pre-plan your warm-ups and attempts. Don't turn up on the day and think it'll all click. Have a plan. Be prepared to change the plan. It's like driving in a car with a map. You've mapped something out. Doesn't mean you're going to take that route exactly, because there might be traffic here. You might change a bit, but hey, if you haven't even got a map, you're screwed. Do you know what I mean? So have a plan. Have a plan for your warm-ups, your attempts. Pre-pack the night before. Another thing that personally I say, I've never heard anyone else say, is don't go to bed early. Go to bed when you want to sleep. Lying there, having 4 hours sleep where you just knocked out, you'll be fine. One day of only sleeping 4 hours, you'll be fine. But laying there all night, stressing and thinking about, because you went to bed at 8 o'clock, thinking you're going to get 12 hours or 10 hours sleep, and stressing all night long and not really sleeping, it's the stress that's going to be the problem, not the lack of sleep. So just put your head down on the pillow when you're tired, try and chill out early, you know what I mean? Things like that. But sleep when you're ready to sleep. Even if you've got 4 hours sleep, don't worry about it. It's absolutely fine. Don't stress about anything the night before. It doesn't matter. Now you did all the hard work. There's nothing you can do. Once you've checked your route and you've looked at your bag and it's all packed, you're ready to go. Perfect. Don't be afraid to ask people questions at the comp. If you don't know where you are, what you're doing, you know what I mean, then by all means, ask someone. Just say, look, I'm new to it. I don't know, where do I go for this? What do I do? Try and read the rules beforehand. Make sure your kit's appropriate. Don't go up like the union. I'm not going to say it. Like some championships, I almost said it, maybe you heard me, where you think that everybody needs to tell you everything about it. It is up to you to learn the rules. You should learn them before turning up. But again, as long as you're polite, don't be afraid to ask, but don't demand at the same time. Like, oh, nobody told me this kit wasn't appropriate. Like, you should have known that. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's no one else's responsibility. And nerves are good. Hey, if you're not nervous, it's not a good sign.
Yeah.
You know, I can vouch for that 100%. For me, competing personally, when I was doing it, I used to not get nervous enough because I've done a lot of competitions and done other sports. So the problem that I'd have is I just wouldn't bring my A game. I almost needed like to get a bit of nerves, almost put money down on the table. Yeah. So don't worry about nerves. Nerves are a good sign, not a bad sign. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I say to everyone, if you weren't nervous, it'll make me worried a little bit more. I still get nervous, whether it was from playing rugby or, powerlifting. Nerves are good because it gives you that, a little bit like what you said, it makes you a little bit more alert, but also it makes you think, oh, let me just double check what I've got. It makes you just concentrate a little bit more. I think if you haven't got any nerves and you're going in, I think sometimes that can be a little bit. Although having said that, I think, being confident is a good thing. Being a little bit overconfident and just expecting isn't a good way to go about things.
Yeah, definitely not, mate.
So from there, loads of topics covered on there. All things powerlifting, from technique to recovery and all that sort of stuff. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you. I enjoyed, when we spoke on the phone to set up this chat. I've been really, really looking forward to chatting about these topics with you. Just on the note, obviously, mentioned it a couple of times of your new book coming out. What can people expect? Obviously, we've covered a couple of topics there.
Yeah.
What can people expect? When is it coming out? And what's going to be happening with that?
Yeah, cool. So just a quick overview. I mean, Powerlifting Essentials, it really is that. It's my editors really kept me quite accountable. I'll sometimes ramble on about stuff and maybe get a bit too technical at times, but this is really not it. It really is a book that, I guess, in powerlifting, me and you can sit down and read books that are quite highbrow and get a lot from it. But I think people that maybe don't have that anatomy and physiology background, or a personal trainer or a coach, get a lot less from the books out there that everyone tells them they should read. Yeah. In truth, this book is very much targeted for people that are novice intermediate, that just really want the basic kind of tips that me and yourself probably learned over a few years of being in the sport initially, and think, I wish I'd learned that early on.
Yeah.
And then a few extra things as well chucked in the mix. It pretty much goes through everything from, really all the essentials, everything from, looking at what might suit you better when it comes to technique on the squat, bench, and deadlift, how best to achieve that. When it comes down to programming, like I mentioned earlier, an acclimation phase about how best to achieve technical mastery, or at least making those lifts more optimal, and a good program to start with that really is going to probably serve you a lot better than the cookie cutter novice programs out there. And it's very much about just getting under the bar and a sensible, logical way of building skill. And then you would want to progress to one of those novice programs, and you get the best of everything then. Yeah. It goes into food nutrition tips like we talked about, and far more about competing, things that are going to be expected of you, rules, even little things like how best, when you're early on, if you can, how best to create lifts or setting up lifts that influence the referees positively in your favor. So there's little cheats about how you can how you can avoid a red light by doing this, potentially, even if maybe you've not locked out the deadlift, that will make the deadlift look like the deadlift is finished and fool the referees into giving you white lights, whereas they might not. Also, controlling your environment about how best to compete. So you're improving your game day skill so that you're getting commands when you want them, rather than when the refs, now don't get me wrong, the refs are in charge, but you can influence them when they're likely to give you those commands, all things being right. Yeah. So you start to kind of control your environment better. So there's everything from technique, to programming, to game day lifting, a little bit on nutrition and stuff like that. Basically, all the things that myself, anyway, that I would have hoped that when I first decided to powerlift, I could have picked the book up and I would have had a really wicked head start. That's what it is. It's written in a very understandable way. It's not too Lawrence-y where it's going to get overly technical with words that sometimes people go, I didn't understand that. Yeah. It's been edited out, so it's very understandable. There is a big emphasis on technique because it's geared towards novice and intermediate or novice intermediate lifters. But I think it's one of the first books where it stands out a little from anything else, and it's very simple. It's the first real book on powerlifting that's written for people that aren't necessarily personal trainers or coaches. I think if you're a coach, you're still going to take a lot from it. If you're a novice or intermediate coach, you can probably take a lot from it. There'll be a lot of little tidbits you can take out. Think, oh yeah, what about this, that, and that? Yeah. But I think the problem is when most people throw a book down for powerlifting or a source of information, for most people that aren't from anatomy and physiology backgrounds, the information, they might read the book, but how much they actually take in is probably not that much. So I think this book is very much set that you can pick it up. It's very readable. It's very understandable. It's set out very logical. And most important, it's about helping you achieve your goals and having fun doing it and not setting these ridiculous expectations, but allowing you to know what good progression should be and targets for you to hit, and just really enjoy your lifting. And that's pretty much it if I try and sum it up.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely awesome. And we've said before, I think we actually chatted about it a little bit when we were on the phone setting up the chat, that powerlifting is growing, more people are getting involved in the sport, and I think because there's that much information out there that I think sometimes all these little things that we've spoken about are often overlooked. And from the podcast side of things, I want people to listen to the likes of yourself to be like, oh, okay, so actually this is why I'm not getting stronger, or this is why I've hit a little bit of a plateau. And I think the more sort of the people that look at the information of this, or the more people that pick up your book, will be it will increase I think it will help increase people enjoying competitions a little bit more, and improving the standard a little bit more, rather than having people coming in, progressing a little bit, getting injured because they've missed a little thing that was their weak link in their chain, or have that raw power and never focused on technique. So as a powerlifting fan, if you like, I'm really looking forward to seeing it get out there.
Well, I'm going to send you a copy anyway, Steve. So you've got a copy coming from me, bud.
Nice, spot on. I'll be looking forward to it. With everything on that, if anyone has maybe any questions from everything that we've chatted about, or want to know, when the book is going to be published, or any advice with coaching or anything like that, where can people find you, or a little bit of information of when the book's going to be coming out?
Yeah, so it should be mid-September. The book should be coming out. And information like I post all the time. So it's Strength Coach Farncombe, because technically I am a strength coach. So it's like I've worked with multiple different sports. Yeah. Obviously, doing powerlifting, something I've always gravitated to. But yeah, so Strength Coach Farncombe, Instagram, Facebook, and .com. But yeah, the book will be obviously available on like things like Amazon and stuff. But I'll be posting out there. Give us a follow on the Instagram and stuff like that. But yeah, again, thank you very much for allowing me to kind of talk on this, because I do think the book itself will be like what you do see nowadays. Not going too far off subject because we're wrapping it up, but people read a lot of articles, but then when you scratch the surface and you go, yeah, I totally get that. So how are you addressing this? They're like, I don't know, I never even thought about that, because the article didn't say. This is why years ago, like, even reading research is great, but honestly, learning under good coaches, reading books is always great, because you get the context that the information's set in, because there's lots of things that conflicts with that and that. That's why I think learning the big picture stuff is super important, and really laying down that base of learning is super important to really enjoying and having a successful powerlifting career. But yeah, like I say, strength coach Farncombe. Yeah, check out the Facebook or Instagram. Give us a follow. Say hello. Perfect.
Awesome. For everyone listening, 100%. Look at the book when it comes out, especially, I work with a lot of, novice and intermediate lifters. 100%. Go check out the book. Go check out the work that Lawrence does and what he posts. I know as a lifter and a coach myself, it really helps me. And having had the opportunity to speak to you, quite a couple of times and actually catch up with you at the All Englands, a couple of months ago, it's been absolutely awesome. So 100% for novice, intermediate, powerlifters, coaches as well. Look at the content that Lawrence is putting out there, because it is really, really worth it. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me, Lawrence. I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did, and I will see you all next week.